Three, two, one. Welcome to another edition of the Alaska Sports Talk podcast. I am your host, Isaiah Vreeman. Normally, Keaton Homer is doing this intro, but Keaton has gotten the crud that's been going around the schools. I had it a few days ago during Division I hockey, while Keaton didn't have it, and now Keaton has it. So we have a special guest that's going to be filling in uh, for hosting duties with me. So you don't just hear my voice, but it is Josh Reed, Anchorage Daily News sports reporter. Thank you, Josh, so much for filling in for us and helping us talk Alaska sports for this past week.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Isaiah. Thanks for having me. I was actually sitting a couple feet away from Keaton on Saturday. I'm just glad I didn't catch whatever he got. I
Yeah,
got five tickets at home, man.
you should be. He texted me yesterday and he's like, "Oh, he just can't tape," and I could barely talk. It was bad. That's why we're taping this podcast on Wednesday night instead of our normal Tuesday night, which is in some ways actually good because we were able to kind of update you on some scores and some big shakeups that happened on Tuesday night regarding some of the basketball games. But we'll get started. Josh already mentioned it, but Division One hockey was something that we talked about in the last podcast for a while. Division One hockey out at the Menard for Division One, and boy, Josh, I have to say, there were some good games. The Colony Wasilla game on Thursday was really good. The Chugiak South game, those last two games of the day on Thursday were excellent hockey games. And you know, West was impressive. They won the state championship for Division One, but here's the interesting thing. They won against Eagle River in the quarterfinals 7-0. Then they beat Chugiak 7-0 in the semifinals. And then they beat West Valley in the championships 3-0. They went 17-0 for goals. They scored 17, they gave up none over 3 games in a state championship. That in 15 years of doing Division One hockey, that's one of the more impressive state championship runs I've seen. It was really impressive. Josh, you were
I mean,
there. Tell us what you thought.
yeah, if you go back to last weekend against regionals, they didn't allow a single goal either. So they had a really had a dominant postseason. They went 5 straight games without giving up a single goal. Outscored their opponents a combined 25-0, I believe. So yeah, I mean West it really ended this season as even more dominant than the way they kind of ran through the regular season, man. I mean, not giving up a single goal, and as much as you want to give Gunnar Berger the all his props, and he deserves the props, but the guy's like, I mean, he has one of the easier goaltending jobs in the state, man. His defensive defensemen are great in front of him, man. But even when he is he's never really been under siege at any point this season. But even when he does, you can come under fire a little bit, especially when they're kind of short-handed on the ice. That kid makes such clutch saves look nonchalant sometimes. It's really impressive. And yeah, that West team was loaded, and they really got the job done and dominated throughout this entire postseason. I was really surprised by that semifinal game with Chugiak. Usually their games are usually really tight, much closer than that. But man, they were not. The Eagles were not playing around this postseason.
No, you have that right. They were not playing around. They were not playing around. They were there for a mission, and they were going to say we're the number one seed, and we don't think it's particularly close. And they played like it. I didn't realize they hadn't given up a goal in the conference tournament either. So 5 straight scoreless games in the postseason, which is, I mean, that is super impressive. And you're right. You're right. The from what I saw with West, their defense is so fast and they recover so fast. Even if they took a little bit of a chance, they were so fast and were able to get in proper angles to play defense and let their goalie really make good saves. But he was not under siege all the time. The West offense and their defense was just so impressive.
Yeah, especially if they ever get an advantage on the ice, it's almost like a death knell for the other team, man. I mean, it's just like they're so potent on offense. It's not just like one or two guys. They have shifts of guys, several different lines that are just as capable of scoring on you at any time as the other ones. But especially the one Dietrich brother on it.
Yeah, it was really a thing of beauty what they did during the state championship. And like you said, you know, their games against Chugiak over the course of the season had been pretty back and forth, 4-2 win, you know, 4-2, a couple 4-2 wins. You know, they only won in the state in the conference championship 2-0. They were really close, and then all of a sudden it was a 7-0 explosion. And then West Valley, from what I saw, was pretty good, and they put up a good fight. But West was just they were by far the best team the last two weekends of the season, and they really proved it. So congratulations to the West Anchorage Eagles. That's their second D1 state championship in a row. They actually played in the state championship back in, let's see, it's 2025. They played in 2024. They won 2024, 2025. They played in 2023, but they lost in the championship to Diamond.
True, yeah,
No, to Chugiak,
play
excuse me.
Diamond.
Thank you. Chugiak. So they they are not unfamiliar with the state championship, and they played like it. It was quite impressive. Congratulations to the West Anchorage Eagles for the 2025 First National Cup D1 Hockey State Championships. And that trophy, I know, will be displayed proudly over at the Nest for a while, for a calendar year. And we'll see if they can have that same kind of dominance next year, because, wow, that was impressive. So I was really happy, Josh, when you said that you're going to be able to do this, especially last minute today. So again, appreciate you filling in for Keaton on this. And since you're here and obviously looking ahead to March Madness, which is we have a I don't know if you know this, but we have a little countdown counter on the ASAA websites, but we actually put that same countdown counter on the Alaska Sports Talk page. And it's kind of this love-hate relationship I have with this countdown clock for March Madness. And right now it says 20 days, 15 minutes, and 22 seconds until the ball tips off for March Madness Alaska. And 20 days seems like a long ways away, but in reality, it's coming up real fast. So it was really advantageous that you were able to come on, because you've been to a lot of these games. I've been to some, but you've been to more in the last, you know, 6, 7 weeks than I have. So as we're getting ready for March Madness next week, actually, because I had to take a look at the calendar to double check things. Next week, some of the smaller classification conference tournaments are starting. So a lot of the 1A conference tournaments start on Wednesday, Thursday next week, and they run through the weekend. And then the week after that is 3A, 4A. So next week's a big week. So I'm just going to kind of open-ended question to you. What have you been seeing the last few weeks at the 3A and 4A level for state basketball, and what the conferences are looking like, what some of the teams are looking like?
A lot of it's usual suspects as far as East Boys are still undefeated, but what they've done this year, they haven't been, I wouldn't say the dominant force, because they've really had to fight and claw their way to some of these victories. I was at that game this past Friday where they were down 34-19 at halftime at home to Diamond. I mean, it was a bit of a shell shock, man. I mean, like they couldn't, nothing could go wrong for America Dukovic in the second quarter of that game. They was making the rain threes like Steph Curry out there. And then just like something kind of clicked with East in the second half, to where they kind of tightened up on defense, and then they started making their shots. And it was really a tale of two halves. It was pretty impressive. But that's kind of how East has been this year. They still found ways to win. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Chiefs.
Yes.
In a sense, where it's like, like, I keep getting away with this, but when you watch them play, you really got a respect for where they go about business, because they kind of stay calm, cool, and collected, even if they're down a few points. And 15 points was the most they've been down since the Alaska Airlines Classic, when they lost to Hoover. And like, so you could almost like pencil in their one loss to an out of state team in the last classic every year. Other than that, they keep running the table, right? But yeah, it's been I would say well, not necessarily tough sledding, but they've really been grinding out a lot of these wins. It's really impressive to see, just kind of see how they kind of come almost like Patrick Mahomes in a sense, come up clutch in these in late game situations to either pull ahead or eke one out. I know they had a really close game against West Valley the previous weekend. So East has been as expected as far as taking care of business and looking like the dominant power in the state of Alaska at the boys 4A level. Um, other 4A standouts, Bartlett's on the rise, Service is on the rise. West is defeated, handed Nome Belts their first loss, and then Nome got their get back the following day. They had a little two-game non-conference series this past weekend up in Fairbanks.
So when I agree with you, from what I've seen with East this year, it's been a lot like the Kansas City Chiefs, to your point. Close games, they're still winning. They're still kind of what I would say the best team in the state right now. They're not the 20-point games, they're the 2-point games or the 3-point games. What have you seen on from the rest of the CIC? East obviously is kind of that number one right now in the CIC. They're undefeated. Who do you think are the some of the ones that can really challenge them in the conference tournament? What are some of the teams that you see that really could give them some problems coming up this last week of the season, next week, and then into the conference tournament?
Those crosstown rivals always play tough. I know West isn't up in the standings right now, but they always play East pretty tough. And then Diamond, like I just said, like they play them. They had a double-digit lead on those guys on the road, so that was pretty impressive. And prior to that they were only CIC team that had lost to East by less than a possession this season. Then Service and Bartlett are pretty good too. They've all been kind of trading blows at this for the second, third, and fourth seed in the CIC standings. So those three teams, Service, Bartlett, and Service, Bartlett, Diamond, and then West coming up the rear.
So when we were talking kind of before the podcast started, I had mentioned that it was a little fortuitous that we didn't have the podcast last night for taping because we were able to see some of the Tuesday night scores come in. And one score, we've talked a little bit about the 4A boys, but one score that really surprised me on the 4A girls side that came in. I mean, it's a rivalry game. We've talked about those before, but the Northern Lights Conference, that's kind of the three-headed monster that they have with Wasilla, Colony, and Mountain City. And Wasilla went to Colony, and Colony ended up playing, and they ended up winning. Colony won 39-38 for Wasilla's first loss in conference this year, and for the first loss for them this season. Which, I mean, I've seen Colony play, and I've seen Wasilla play, and Wasilla is, when they're on all cylinders, they just don't look like they can be beat. They just are this well-oiled machine. And Haley Clark, from what I've seen on some stats, kind of lit up for 21 points of the 39, three-pointers, 21 points total. I mean, they look, Wasilla, Colony, Mountain City, all kind of are right there with each other. I would say Wasilla has earned that number one seed, that number one ranking when you look at their season in totality. The Anchorage school's the best, and you've seen them the most out of all of them. Which of the Anchorage teams right now for the girls' side do you see that are the best in the CIC, but then also might be able to challenge some of the Northern Lights Conference teams to something, because they're going to end up seeing each other at some point at the state championship. So, kind of what are you seeing with some of the girls' side of things?
Oh, the Bartlett for sure. Bartlett for sure. They're a
Bartlett,
really young team and team on the rise. They've actually played. I think they didn't lose to Wasilla too bad, if I'm not mistaken, earlier this season. So they've like Bartlett's played some of these Northern Lights Conference teams, and held their own. Led by that star freshman they have in Kennedy Gaines. I mean, that girl is a monster, man.
she's
I watched her.
unreal.
Yeah, I watched her drop 41 points against Service a couple weeks back. Her and Ariana Watson going at it. Those are two young goats in the making right there, man. But yeah, they both had 21 points in the first half, and then Kennedy's kind of took off in the second half there. And yeah, they're definitely going to be, especially with the senior class from Wasilla and Colony and Morgan Maldonado for Mountain City kind of moving on after this year. I feel like you're going to see a resurgence as far as CIC. I wouldn't say necessarily dominance, but like prominence and for girls 4A. But yeah, I have to give Bartlett the nod as far as the top contender coming out of the CIC when it comes to like the upper echelon of girls teams in the state right now at the 4A level.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Bartlett, I've only seen them play once, but it was impressive. Kennedy, she is the real deal, and it's hard to believe she's only a freshman. That's one of the more crazy things I've seen. So, kind of looking ahead, there's been a lot of talk. I was around a lot of the schools today, dropping off some March Madness Alaska posters for schools to hang up in their school. And one of the common questions I had was the RPI and how can some of these things be the way that they are and all this other stuff. And we've talked the RPI to death. I'm just going to say it again for this podcast and people that are listening. It's the totality of the whole season. It's your record, it's your opponent's record, and then your opponent's record. And all those are put together, added up, and averaged out, and that's your RPI. So it's not just based head to head, and that's the only thing that matters. It's a lot of different things. Again, do I think it's the absolute best system? No. Obviously, straight head to heads are the best, but with Alaska having a lot of unbalanced conferences, CIC having 8 teams, some of these other conferences only having 2 or 3, it it helps balance some things out and gives a pretty accurate picture. Now, one thing I saw, we're talking 4A girls right now, Mountain City, Wasilla, it looks like their game has just been put in with the game against Colony. So it's not completely accurate right now. Mountain City's ranked number 1 and Wasilla's 0.002 behind. So again, conference tournament games coming up in the last week of conference, these things are going to change because Mountain City, Wasilla, and Colony are so close to each other. And then there's a little bit of a gap before Bartlett is the next one at 0.63. When I see this, there's obviously that clear delineation. Do you think that there's going to be some real challengers at all from what you've seen over the course of this year so far, Josh, for a state championship to not be from the Northern Lights Conference, but maybe a Mid Alaska or a Southeast or even a CIC?
I think it's gonna be hard this year, man. I really do. Just
Yeah,
because these Northern Lights teams, they've been not only are they talented, but they've all been playing together for so long.
yeah,
Over at Wasilla, Layla Hayes and Miley Anderson and those girls have been they play like two sports together, volleyball and basketball. They play
yep,
together year round. And then Haley Clark and those other girls out in the valley, they've been playing together for so long too. So you have these young ascending teams in your services and your Bartletts who like yeah they've been playing together at the youth level, but these girls at Wasilla and Colony and Mountain City have been playing together at the high school level for 4+ years. So that experience and that pedigree, and they a lot of them been there, done that. Played in multiple state championships, won multiple state championships. I think they're going to be hard to beat. Although you can, but that's why they call it March Madness for a reason,
yeah,
right? So you
that's
never
very
know.
true. Well, and I think you brought up a good point. They call it March Madness for a reason. I agree with you. I think because they're such between those 3 teams, they have more championship experience than any of the other teams at the 4A girls level. They just do. Those 3 have the most. They've been in the biggest games. They've won the state championships the last years, however many years in a row. But starting next year, especially when those classes graduate, that are all seniors this year. Like you said, Miley Anderson, Layla Hayes, Haley Clark, Morgan Montelato. I mean, that's going to leave some real breathing room for somebody like Kennedy and Ariana in service and people at West. So I'm really excited to see what will happen. I know this, the 4A girls championship for state is going to be something else. And one thing I'm really looking forward to is a lot of times you have conference tournaments that rotate out of Anchorage just because they're in the conferences. And so the Northern Lights rotates around. This year, the Northern Lights Conference is being hosted at Grace Christian School, CIC over at West. So the two biggest conferences in the state for 4A are playing in Anchorage, which is nice. Then you also have a couple 2A conferences that are playing in Anchorage, one at Lumen Christi and another one, the 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 Northern Conference over at Mountain City for 2A. So there's going to be a lot of great basketball in a couple of weeks at the conference tournament. So now we'll turn our attention to the 4A boys classification. You know, and I was on the phone with a coach for a while explaining the RPI and stuff like that. And the same principles apply to the 4A boys. There's going to be more movement. Right now, Betty Davis East is ranked second to Grace Christian in the 4A boys. And again, part of that reason is because the opponent's winning percentage for Grace is almost at 60%, where the next closest one, Betty Davis East, is at 48%. West Valley has a pretty high opponent's winning percentage. You know, so there's a lot of factors that go into that. But right now, Grace is one, Betty Davis is at two. And again, that's 0.01 apart from each other. So real close. Then West Valley, Service, Colony, Wasilla, Palmer, Diamond are your next top teams. Ketchikan at number 9, Monroe at number 10, West at number 11. I was talking to somebody, Josh, and I'd love to get your opinion on this. When I look at the 4A boys the last few years, Betty Davis East has been kind of the clear, well, the last 3 years really has been the clear team to beat. They've dominated their opponents. Granted, I know South won a few years ago against East in an incredible championship game on a last second shot, but East had been dominant that year. And the last 2 years, they've been dominant. I think the potential for the 4A boys state championship this year, along with the conference tournaments, but especially the state championship, has the potential to be the most wide open and close it's been in years, in absolute years, probably since pre-COVID, 2019. That's what it looks like to me. Betty Davis East has been dominant. They are dominant. They've been winning the games. They've been a lot closer. They're not quite the same team they've been in the past, and other teams are a little bit closer. That's my feeling on it, is I think that it could be anybody's game. And now you add a powerhouse like Grace, who I've said it on the podcast before. Bristol Tobin is a
Yeah,
totally different player. I
yeah,
saw him last year, and then I saw him over at the Alaska Prep Shootout this year, and that was not the same kid. That was a totally different player. He is at a whole nother level, and that's why Grace is where they're at. I think the
yeah.
4A boys tournament is going to be something else.
Yeah, yeah, and Grace was going to be my first name up if you would have asked me about a potential, like wrench in the East three-peat plans, because the Grace boys are here to play and they're here to stay, man. I mean those guys are serious contenders. I know they recently suffered their, I think, second or third 4A loss since being bumped up this year, but even that was a close one to Wasilla, out in Wasilla. And yeah, man, like they're a serious outfit out there. And I mean, so Bristol is stepping up for Kellen Jedlicka, the four
Yeah.
the Gatorade Player of the Year from last year, and everything's kind of flowing through Bristol now. You got Bristol, you got Robbie Annette over there, a Gatorade Player of the Year for cross country, and yeah, man, those two guys, that's kind of where everything kind of flows through for Grace Christian. I think they're going to be a serious contender this year. And yeah, yeah, they're fun to watch, and Bristol especially is fun to watch.
Well, and when I look at these top teams, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you've seen something different than I have, because again, you have seen some of these teams more recently than I have, but Grace plays a style that they can run and gun if they need to, but really they're much more of a half court offense. They'll run the breaks, but they're more than happy to slow it down a little bit and get into a half court offense. East can do both. I think Chuck does a good job with that. They like to run more than just running half court sets. West Valley, they just want to run. Service likes to run. Colony kind of does a little bit of both. Wasilla will do a little bit of both. I, Palmer, I haven't seen Palmer play this year, but I know Diamond will get up and down the floor, but they can run some half court things. I just think there's so many different teams that run so many different styles that Grace against the West Valley, we've seen that a little bit before. Grace lost to West Valley, I believe it was earlier this year. East beat West Valley earlier or in Fairbanks at West Valley just a few weeks ago. Service has lost to all three of the teams, but some of them have been close. Colony back and forth with some teams. Same with Wasilla. Diamond obviously was up 19 against East just last week. You know, it seems like there's not one dominant style that's kind of leading any one of these teams. It seems like a lot of them can do both, but they have to win their way or not. What do you see in some of that?
Yeah, I mean, and when Grace Christian actually got their get back against West Valley, so that West Valley was the first 4A loss that they had, and then at the prep shootout they got their get back in the finals for that game, and Bristol Tobin was named tournament MVP for that game, and so yeah, it's really one of you like to say styles makes fight kind of thing, but it's
Mm-hmm.
really like whatever team can kind of like has counters for the other teams go to, right? Like like I said, like the TS fight teams like the East and the Grace Christians are really set up to succeed because they can play multiple different ways and you kind of can counter. All right, if you want to try to take away this aspect of our game or this particular player, we can still beat you with this player. And then basketball is the kind of game where even if you try to take away a player, eventually that player is going to go off. If he's that elite of a player, they're gonna get theirs, and what you really kind of got to prevent is the other guys from getting theirs too. The other guys around them.
You know, one thing, and I know when I was coaching, and I'm sure some of the players, I'm sure the Mountain City girls coach Lonnie has heard me say this many times before, and I'm sure he might. I don't think he'll roll his eyes, but he'll laugh because he's heard me say these things before. But I think now that we're getting closer to tournament time for conferences and obviously state, I agree with your point so much that some of these teams can do both. But when I look at it, time and score is going to be such a big deal because some of these games are going to be super close. It's going to be 3 points here, 3 points there, 1 point game, 1 point game, and closing out quarters, closing out the half, keeping timeouts, and running time and score are going to be so, so important. Time and score, time and score. That's just, I hammer that into players because you got to know time and score. And I think that it's not a secret that a lot of these coaches, where you see these teams at the tops, are good at time and score.
Yeah, they let their players know. Like when the time's getting low, hey, we want to keep the ball. Don't shoot until there's like 7 seconds left on the clock because they want to reduce any chance the other team getting into possession at the end of a quarter. And that's just kind of playing 40 chess in a sense that like because you sometimes you'll get kids who get trigger happy even if they get a
Mm-hmm.
wide open even if they get a wide open look and the coach will be like no 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 no. Like and then like just kind of hold and you really got to respect the restraint that these coaches implement into their students because like it's kind of hard to pull back the reins on young teenage boys, man.
Oh, yeah.
It's like it's a little bit easier with girls because like they're a little bit more amenable to coaching. But sometimes with teenage boys, especially if they get an open look, they like a lot of them are so confident they can nail that shot or they can make give their team an edge heading into the fourth quarter, heading into halftime. But just it's the best teams show that restraint when in the crunch time to where they're not going to leave any kind of like margin for error for the other team to potentially get another possession. You got to respect and admire that.
No, you're 100% right. I have seen at state championships, I've sat courtside during semifinal games where I shake my head going, 2 minutes left. They didn't, the couple players just all of a sudden, nope, we're not thinking this way and we're going to take this shot. It was not a great shot. and it ended up costing them the game. It ended up costing them a semifinal win. And I've seen uber talented teams not do the right thing in time and score, and they lose. And I mean, I'm sure people that are listening to this podcast have 4 or 5 times that they can think of in their head this year and last year, maybe in the last few years, where they're shaking their head going, yep, time and score. They would have held off, done something a little differently with this time instead of doing that shot. They probably would have ended up winning that game. And I just love seeing basketball, and especially smart basketball played down the stretch. It's there's just nothing like it when the whole crowd is oohing and eyeing and wondering what people are going to do after timeouts. And this will be the last state championship for 4A anyway, without the shot clock. Next
Yeah.
year, shot clock comes into play. So that's, is that going to come into play during most of the quarters? No, but it will come into play and change the game a little bit when it comes to end of quarters, end of halves, end of games. So really interested to see how coaches are going to approach that this year and then moving on into next year. So
Yeah, I'm excited for that innovation too.
yeah, I'm really excited. Now, when you look at we'll talk a little bit of the 3A girls classification. Got a couple leads on some people for next week that possibly are going to come on and talk, oh, excuse me, a little bit more about the 1A and 2A levels, since some of the 1A, most of the 1A conferences and a couple of the 2A conferences will start their conference tournaments next week. But for the 3A girls classification, the Grace girls right now are ranked number one. They're a juggernaut. They really are. They're a very dominant team. They've played a pretty tough schedule. They've lost to some 4A teams, and I think I think they have a couple losses to Wasilla. Um, I think one to, let's see, yeah, one to Wasilla, one to Colony, one to Service, and one to Mountain City. So they've played, the four toughest teams in Anchorage, or I should say not in Anchorage, but in the Northern Lights, and they ended up losing. And then Service is obviously a really good team at the girls level as well. So they're ranked number one. Monroe girls are ranked number two. Barrow girls are ranked number three. Bethel is ranked number four. Nome five. Galena six. Kenai seven, and Valdez eight. This is the first time I can remember in years that I've seen Galena in the top for girls in that top eight. So that's pretty exciting. That's not familiar territory for them. So that's pretty exciting to see. And then for the boys 3A classification, it's kind of been a battle all year between Sitka and Nome for that number one spot. Right now, Sitka holds it, and Nome is in second. Mount Edgecombe is in third. Barrow is in fourth. Bethel's in fifth. Valdez is sixth. Kenai is seven. And Houston is eighth. Now, if you want to take a look at these RPI rankings right now, again, they will change as more schedules or as more games are put into the system. These will change. These numbers will change a little bit here and there, but that is on ASAA365.com, and you can just go to the basketball RPI page. As the conference tournaments get seeded, and once the regular seasons are done, all the conference tournament brackets that I get from conference tournaments, I will also post on ASAA365.com as well. And a couple of things I just want to bring to your attention. Tickets are now on sale for March Madness Alaska. If you go to ASAA365.com, there's a buy tickets button. You can go up there, click it, and you can actually get tickets for March Madness starting now. So again, as we get closer, the ASAA 365 will have a lot more links that are live and converted for 2025 information. So that's pretty exciting. Josh, what anything else that you're seeing or any trends with basketball at any level that you're seeing so far from your times out at watching these games?
I'm looking forward to seeing more three action. I know the Grace girls have played a tough schedule, but whenever you got Sophie Lemper on your team, you're gonna have a strong chance to contend for a title. And I can't wait to see some more Finn Gregg. I haven't been able to catch him yet
Yeah,
this year. for boys three, but that dude's big time, man.
He is big time. And I've actually seen some highlights online. I haven't actually seen this the team in person yet, but Nanilchik's got a player that I just keep seeing highlights where he's dunking the basketball, and you just don't see that at the 2A level very much. And he's not what we would call sometimes as squeak dunks. Josh, have you heard that term before?
I have not, no.
A squeak dunk where he just a person barely gets above the rim and kind of squeaks the ball in, a little squeak dunk. He's throwing it down with authority. I mean, he's really getting after it. And there's a kid from Barrow. I think he's a sophomore this year. I can't remember his name. Seen some highlights on that. So the 3A tournament for boys and girls is going to be pretty special too. And again, 1A, 2A, we'll have some more information on them in the coming weeks as we get closer for their conference tournaments and their state championship as well. Just a reminder, the March Madness Alaska Selection Show presented by Alaska Sports Talk will be on March 9th. The 3A, or I should say the 1A, 2A will start at 6 o'clock, and the 3A, 4A will start at 7 p.m. So it's one stream, but we're going to kind of split it into two. So the 1A, 2A will start at 6, and at 7 o'clock, the 3A, 4A will start. So pretty excited about kind of tweaking it a little bit and doing that. Maybe have some guests. We have to kind of arrange some of those things, but looking at doing some exciting things for that. So I know, Josh, you going to be going this weekend, or I should say, actually, since it's Wednesday that we're taping this, tomorrow, Thursday, is UAA. Keaton's
Yeah,
resting
yeah,
up.
I'll be at the UA women's game for sure. You know that's for number one in the GNAC between them and Montana State Billings. So that's gonna be big time, and whoever wins that game is gonna get the regular season GNAC crown. And I'm pretty confident in UAA pulling this one out. They're 11-0 at home this year, and I think Montana State Billings is like 5-2 on the road. So I'm giving an edge to UAA in this battle. They're gonna have hopefully the home crowd shows out. I know it's gonna be a Thursday night and people are gonna be just getting off of work, but this women's team really deserves the support of their community. They've done nothing but go above and beyond as far as the product they're putting on the court, and they're playing some great basketball.
Yeah, we're going to try and do a good job for Keaton, kind of previewing what's going to happen upcoming. A lot of basketball this week, then a lot of basketball talk for this podcast, but it is a basketball week. Uh, like you said, Josh, battle for number one in the GNAC, Montana State Billings at UAA on Thursday, 5:15. We need everyone to show up. We need people to show up. Right now, UAA is 13-1 in the GNAC. Montana State Billings is 12-2. Winner of this is number one in the GNAC. We want that to happen. And that's at 5:15 Thursday. Come on out. Then at 7:30, UAA is playing. The men are playing. Who is it?
Same
Seattle.
opponent.
Same opponent, right?
Same
Same
opponent. Yeah.
opponent. They're playing Montana State Billings. And then, so that's Thursday, big night. And then Saturday, we all know, I know this is a big game, especially up here in Alaska. The women play at 5:15, men play at 7:30 on Saturday too against Seattle Pacific. SPU coming to town. And I know that's a popular one. When we're looking at the Montana State Billings UAA women's game for number one, it looks like here's the kind of the probable starters. Amelia Long, senior, she's been on fire. I believe she now has is it steals? Do I have that right? Steals. She's number one in steals for a season in the year for a UAA player. I think she took that last week. Elena
Yeah,
Mack. Sorry
yeah.
about that, Josh. Having a little
I'm
bit
not
of
sure.
a
Yeah, I'm not sure if Amelia has it exactly.
having a little bit of a Zoom issue with the audio. Sometimes I catch up. Sometimes I'm a little behind. Same thing with Josh. But Amelia Long, Alina Mack, they're they're your stalwart guards. Josiah Gamble, Ashlyn Reen, and then Tori Hollingseth head. Excuse me. Wow. It's gonna be a wild time on Thursday. We need everyone to show up. If you are at all a basketball fan and you don't have a high school game that you have to be at because you're a coach or player or mom and dad, we need everyone at the Alaska Airlines Center tomorrow, Thursday, for a doubleheader. I know Josh is going to be there. I'm going to be there. Keaton will be there. I know Brad Lowers will be there. I know anybody in the basketball community needs to be there and support the UA women's basketball team and the men. And then again, like I said, on Saturday, 5:15 for the women, 7:30 for the men, UA versus Seattle Pacific. So big weekend for that. And I believe UA hockey's playing that weekend too.
Hmm.
Yeah, UA went hockey. Let me double check that. That's happening as well. I
Yes,
know the Anchorage
the season
Wolverines,
finale.
the season finale. I know the Anchorage Wolverines are out of town. Let's see. Yeah, you're right. Season finale versus Linwood, the Ava Sports Complex, Friday night, 7 o'clock. So UA campus is going to be a busy one on Friday and Saturday. Well, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So come on out. Josh, have you been able to watch much of UAA this year?
For a hockey or basketball?
Excuse me, I should have said that. For basketball.
Yeah, I've actually covered quite a bit of both the men's and women's team this year, so I'm pretty abreast of what's going on.
So give us your read. Keaton kind of has a theory. It's been hard for the men. They've had these scoring droughts where 4 or 5 minutes they have a hard time scoring. Women obviously have been showing pretty dominant as they're the number one in the GNAC right now. What are some of the themes that you've seen for the men and women's for UA basketball this year?
I mean, so the men's team doesn't really get blown out, right? They for their research there, they lost like 4 or 5 games by like less than like 5 points or so, and it's it's just like they find ways to lose within the margins instead of win within the margins, and that ends up being to their detriment in the end. And it's been really sad to watch. I mean, I watched them against was it Northwest Nazarene? They give like almost like 19-point lead. They blew a 19-point lead just because, like I said, they have those scoring droughts. And not only do they have scoring droughts, but they let the other team get hot and get points in transition. And before you know it, a 7-0 run turns into a 19-2 run.
Yeah, you're right. I haven't been able to. It seems like every game, every weekend series with UAA, when they're at home, it's been a state championship of some sort. So I haven't been able to go to any games. This is the first weekend I can remember, and I think since the beginning of January or before Christmas that we haven't had something the same time that UAA has games. So I'm pretty excited to get over there and watch for myself, and then with my daughter on Saturday because she likes going there as well. The Anchorage Wolverines, as we start to wrap up this podcast episode, the Anchorage Wolverines are out of town this weekend. That they are at the Chippewa Steel this weekend. Right now, they are sitting behind the Wisconsin Wendigo with they're behind by 5 points right now, and they're one game behind. They've got 2 games this weekend against Chippewa Steel, and then next weekend, February 28th and 29th, they play the Fairbanks Ice Dogs in Anchorage at the Sullivan. So big weekends coming up and big points needed for the Anchorage Wolverines. Josh, thank you so much for being a part of this podcast and again filling in kind of really late notice today as I texted you early. Really appreciate you stepping in and done an awesome job. You're always a great guest and obviously a fabulous host with all of your knowledge in Alaska sports. What would be, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, and Keaton's usually the best one at doing this, but since he's not here, I'm going to make an attempt at it. The floor is yours. What is something in Alaska sports in the last, 6 weeks that you really want everyone to know about that you've seen that was just really incredible and a story that you remember? Maybe not all of us have heard it or know about it because there's just been so many things going on. What's something that you've seen in the last 6 weeks, 2 months that really you want to highlight just with what you've seen in Alaska sports the last little while?
it didn't make it until my story about the East Diamond boys basketball game. But I just wanted to highlight the character of one Muhammad Sabali for East. I mean, that kid is a he's the total package, man. Like he dropped 27 points in that game, 15 in the second half, like 21 in the second half alone. But the most impressive thing I saw him do that night came after the game. After I did the post game interview with him and everything, one of the JV players had spilled some chocolate milk on the floor outside the locker room, and people, including old people, were starting to slip and almost fall. And this guy just got done, leading this team to a 15-point comeback in the second half. And I see him go in and out of the locker room and get paper towels from the boys' locker room and literally get down on the ground, clean up a mess that he didn't make. And that just kind of shows the kind of character that this kid has, right? I mean, it was somebody else's mess. He could have had somebody else do it, could have let the custodian know, like, hey, there's a spill here or something like that. But he took it upon himself to go in the locker room and go get those paper towels so that nobody's grandmother would break a hip out there after watching that amazing game. And I just thought that was a testament to his character. And I was talking to Chuck after the game, and he was like, "Yeah, that's just the stuff that you see. That's just Mo. That's how we coach their guys up there." But I mean, the kid comes from a great family, and he's a great role model for other kids. I mean, all around, man. I couldn't say enough positive things about Muhammad Sabali.
Wow, I I'm really glad you told that story. That's a great story. Those are some of the things that we don't see and you don't hear about. You're always seeing a box score or something that's happening in a game. But I can tell you, as somebody who runs events, and when you see something like that, it really is impactful that you see a young man do that. And kudos to him for that. That's kudos to you. I really appreciate that story, Josh. I really like hearing that because all my interactions with him have been great, and to hear a story like that just it warms my heart that he would do something like that, and that does show the character of a team, and I really appreciate that. Well, that is going to end us on a great note moving forward. This is the end of the podcast. Thank you again to Josh Reed, the Anchorage Daily News sports reporter. If you have not read his stuff, make sure that you do. He's a must read for me. I know he's a must read for Keaton and Brad as well. When he does a story, it's something that you want to read and pay attention to. So thank you to Josh Reed for stepping up and helping out with this podcast and being a co-host and kind of helping me along so it wouldn't have to be solo, because we always want Isaiah not solo on these podcasts if we can help it. So thank you, Josh, for that. And again, really like to see everybody come over and say hi. I'll be around. Come say hi to me. Come say hi to Josh. Come say hi to Brad. Don't say hi to Keaton because he'll be broadcasting, but wave to him. Come out and support the UAA basketball teams tomorrow, as the UAA women at 5:15 are going for number one in the GNAC. And again, for Josh Reed, I'm Isaiah Vreeman. Thank you for listening to Alaska Sports Talk podcast this episode. Like, subscribe, favorite, follow, all the things. Do all the things. And we will see you next week on the podcast.